I am Gregory Shaw, 71 years old, and for the last 6 months, I've been pretending I don't know my family is trying to destroy me. Last night, I hosted a party to celebrate selling my company for $47 million. Just before the toast, my daughter-in-law Sabrina leaned over the table thinking no one was watching and dropped a small pill into my champagne. She smiled at me a killer's smile. I just smiled back. What she didn't know was that I'd been waiting, and that the glass she spiked wasn't the one I was going to drink. Before I tell you what happened when her own father drank that glass, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. Let me know in the comments. And please hit like and subscribe if you believe that underestimating your elders is a very, very dangerous game. The ballroom was suffocating. Not from the heat, the air conditioning was running perfectly, but from the sheer weight of expectation. 400 people, the entire spectrum of my 40-year career, were looking at me. Bankers, engineers, old rivals, and young talent. I'd mentored all packed into this ridiculously expensive room at the Four Seasons. I am Gregory Shaw, 71 years old, and I hate parties, but this one was necessary. I tapped the microphone. The light feedback squeal silenced the room. Friends, I started, my voice steady. Colleagues, thank you for coming. I looked over at the family table. My son Leo, looking pale and thin, in a suit that cost more than my first car, was nervously shredding a cocktail napkin. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He hadn't really met my eyes in 3 years, not since he married Sabrina. And then there was Sabrina, my daughter-in-law. She was beaming a radiant portrait of the supportive wife. Her smile was perfect, practiced, and utterly cold. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. She raised her glass to me, a silent, "Congratulations," but her eyes were saying something else entirely. They were saying, "Finally." "I know the rumors have been flying," I continued, "so let me make it official. As of last Friday, Shaw Technologies, the company I started in my garage with a soldering iron and a dream, has been sold for $47 million. The room exploded. It wasn't just applause. It was a roar. People were on their feet. Flashes from financial reporters' cameras went off like small bombs. 47 million. The number hung in the air, heavy and sweet. I stepped down from the small stage, navigating the sea of hands. "Greg, you genius. Congratulations, Mr. Shaw. You earned it." I saw a waiter in a sharp tuxedo maneuvering a silver tray of champagne toward the family table. This was it. I politely turned my back to my family, pretending to be engrossed in a handshake with an old competitor. "Frankly, Greg, I never thought you'd sell," he was saying. "All good things must come to an end, Robert," I replied, but I wasn't watching him. I was watching Sabrina. In the reflection of a large abstract oil painting on the far wall, I saw her movements. The waiter placed the glasses. She waited until he turned, then, thinking she was completely obscured by the floral centerpiece, her hand darted from her glittering clutch purse. Quick as a snake, she dropped a small white pill into the glass designated for me. I watched the pill dissolve instantly, leaving no trace. She was good. Practiced. It made me wonder how many other things she had practiced. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I felt validated. I was right. All the months of suspicion, all the small missing pieces, all the late-night encrypted phone calls my private investigator had recorded, it all led to this. I knew this was coming. In fact, I had counted on it. This entire $47 million party was a trap, and the bait was me. I turned back to the table, my face a mask of grandfatherly joy. Ah, champagne wonderful. Sabrina's father, Mitchell Conrad, was standing right there, his chest puffed out. He was a big man who always seemed to be taking up more space than he was entitled to. He was already talking loudly to a local city councilman, gesturing wildly. And of course, I was the one who advised Greg on the exit strategy. He was lying. The key to a deal this big isn't the tech, it's the timing. It's the vision. Mitchell hadn't advised me on anything except how to write him a check. The waiter was gone. The glasses were set. My glass with the dissolved poison sat waiting. Sabrina's eyes were fixed on me. "Gregory," I said, my voice suddenly raspy. I coughed a deep, rattling hack that sounded genuinely alarming. I leaned heavily on the table, my hand knocking into the stem of my glass and Mitchell's. "Oh, goodness," I sputtered. Everyone at the table turned to look at me, their faces etched with concern. "Dad, are you okay?" Leo asked, jumping up. Fine, I wheezed. And in that 2-second window of distraction, my hand, the hand that used to solder microchips, performed the single most important maneuver of my life. It was a simple, elegant switch. When I straightened up, the glass in front of me was clean. The poisoned glass was now sitting directly in front of Mitchell Conrad. "Just a tickle in my throat," I said, smiling weakly. "Well, let's get that toast moving," Sabrina announced, her voice a little too bright. She was impatient. She picked up her own glass. Her eyes bored into me. "Dad, raise your glass." Mitchell, annoyed that his story had been interrupted, snatched up the glass in front of him. The glass meant for me. I looked at Sabrina. I smiled. I raised my glass. "To family," I said. Mitchell Conrad loved the sound of his own voice. He grabbed the microphone from the event coordinator, who looked annoyed but was too polite to stop the father of the brides-in-law. Friends, Mitch boomed, tapping the mic. "If I could have your attention." The room slowly quieted. "Greg is a good friend," he lied again. "A brilliant man. We've had many discussions about the future of his company." I watched Sabrina. She wasn't watching her father. She was watching me. Her smile was tight, her knuckles white as she gripped her own glass. She was waiting for me to drink. "But the most important thing," Mitch continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "is knowing when to step aside. Greg and I agree it's time for the old generation, no offense, Greg, to step back." He laughed at his own joke. No one else did. "It's time for the new generation. A generation with real vision, real hunger. A generation like my daughter Sabrina and my son-in-law Leo, to take charge." And he was practically announcing their takeover of my new fortune. The arrogance was breathtaking. Leo looked like he wanted to slide under the table. He knew on some level how this looked, but he was too weak to stop it. "So I want to propose a toast," Mitch declared, "to the future and to new visions." He raised his glass high. The poisoned glass. "To the future," I echoed, locking eyes with Sabrina. Mitch drank the entire glass down in one gulp. He was a man who did nothing by halves, especially not drinking. I, on the other hand, merely raised my glass to my lips and pretended to take a sip. Sabrina's smile faltered. It didn't just falter, it collapsed. She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. She saw my glass was still full. She saw I was fine. Her face went from confusion to frustration. She subtly gestured with her head, a sharp, angry flick. "Drink," the gesture said. "Drink it." I ignored her. I turned my attention back to Mitch, and I started counting. 1, 2, 3. Mitch was still basking in the glow of his own voice, telling a story about a golf game. So I said to him, "That's not a bogey, that's a character flaw, huh?" 4. He stopped. He blinked hard. The smile on his face froze, then melted into confusion. He put a hand to his temple as if suddenly dizzy. I feel... 5. His words slurred. "I feel... very warm." He looked down at his hand, confused, as if it didn't belong to him. He was a big man, and when he fell hard. He stumbled backward one step, his eyes rolling up into his head, and then pitched forward. He collapsed onto the dance floor, scattering a small table of champagne flutes, which shattered on the marble. He didn't just faint. He began to convulse. A small choking sound came from his throat. The room exploded into chaos. Annette, his wife, let out a scream that was animalistic. Mitchell! My God, Mitchell! People rushed forward. Call 911. Give him space. Is he breathing? But I wasn't watching the small crowd around Mitch. I was watching Sabrina. She didn't move. She didn't run to her father. She didn't scream for help. She stood perfectly still, her face a mask of pure, white-hot, unfiltered rage. Her plan, her perfect plan, had just literally collapsed on the floor. And then she turned. Her eyes found mine through the chaos. "You!" she shrieked. Her voice cut through the panic like a siren. Every person in that ballroom stopped and turned to look at her. "You did this!" she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "That was your glass! You knew you swapped it!" The silence that followed was absolute. The fluorescent lights of the private hospital's emergency waiting room were humming a cold, sterile sound that drilled into my skull. It was 1 a.m. Annette was sobbing into a handkerchief, her heavy makeup streaked into a grotesque mask. Leo was rocking back and forth in his chair, muttering to himself, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Sabrina was pacing. She looked like a caged tiger, her $10,000 wedding party dress now wrinkled, her hair falling out of its perfect updo. She kept glaring at me, her eyes filled with a murderous hatred. The door to the private triage area opened, and a doctor, a young man who looked exhausted, stepped out. "Family for Mitchell Conrad." We all stood up. Annette rushed him. "Is he? My husband. He's stable," the doctor said, his voice flat. "We pumped his stomach. We got to it in time." Annette sagged with relief. "However," the doctor continued, his tone shifting, "you need to know what we found. His blood work came back positive for a massive near-lethal dose of olanzapine. It's a powerful antipsychotic. This was not an accident." He looked at all of us, his gaze lingering. "I'm required by law to inform you that we have notified the police. They will be here shortly to take a statement. This was an intentional, malicious act of poisoning." Annette started to wail. "Poisoned? Who would poison my husband?" And then Leo, my son, who had been a ghost for 3 years, finally spoke. He turned to his wife. His voice was quiet, trembling, but it cut through Annette's sobs like a razor. "Sabrina." She froze, staring at him. "Sabrina." "What did you mean?" Leo whispered. "Back at the party. Everyone heard you." Sabrina's eyes darted around, looking for an escape. I don't know what you're talking about, Leo. I was in shock. I was hysterical." "No," Leo said, shaking his head. The denial was finally breaking. "You were specific. You said that was his glass. You were looking at Dad." He took a step toward her. "How did you know it was his glass, Sabrina? How did you know he swapped it?" His face contorted in a mask of dawning, unbearable horror. "Sabrina, what was in that glass?" Sabrina saw the trap closing. She saw the look in her husband's eyes, the look in my eyes, the doctor's suspicious gaze. She was trapped. Her perfect plan had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. I don't know," she stammered, her voice rising. I was confused. I just saw your father acting strangely by the table. He must have done it himself. He poisoned Mitch. Did it to frame me. It was a pathetic, desperate lie. It was too late. I watched my son. I saw the last brick of the wall he had built around himself crumble. He looked at his wife, this woman he had adored, this woman he had betrayed his own father for. And for the first time in 3 long years, I saw the son I thought I had lost. He wasn't looking at a wife. He was looking at a monster. The night was far from over. I sat there in that sterile hospital waiting room watching my son Leo stare at the floor. His face was a mask of hollow shock. He was seeing his wife for who she was, perhaps for the first time. But my mind wasn't in that room. It was 6 months ago when I finally admitted to myself that the son I raised was gone and that I had to start protecting myself from the man who had taken his place. My boy Leo. He wasn't always this weak. I remember him as a kid, his hands always dirty with grease and solder. He wasn't like me, a businessman. He was a creator. He got his master's in structural engineering from Carnegie Mellon. He loved the challenge. He loved building things that would outlast him. His first job, he was so proud. He worked on the new bridge downtown. He'd come over for Sunday dinner, his eyes bright, talking about stress loads and tensile strength until my eyes glazed over, but I loved it because he loved it. Then 3 years ago, he brought Sabrina home. She was polished. That's the only word for it. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She was a financial consultant, she said. She talked about leveraging assets and optimizing portfolios. Suddenly, my son, the engineer who loved concrete and steel, started talking about synergy. The change was slow at first. He started dressing better. He stopped talking about his projects. He started talking about money, about passive income streams, about working smart, not hard. That was one of her favorite phrases. Then 6 months ago, he came to my office. Not my home, my office. He sat across from my desk, the desk where he used to do his homework, and he told me he was quitting his job. Quitting? I'd asked, keeping my voice neutral. But you're a lead engineer now. It's a dead end, Dad, he said, and the words sounded rehearsed. I'm just a cog in a machine. Sabrina and Mitch, they've shown me a better way. A better way? I'm going to be a project manager at Mitchell's firm, he announced, puffing out his chest. I knew Mitchell's firm. I'd had it vetted years ago when Sabrina first appeared. It was a shell, a consulting firm that didn't produce a single thing. It just moved money around. And I knew Mitchell was in trouble. A project manager, I repeated. What kind of projects, Leo? Big ones, he said vaguely. International, high-level strategy. It was a fake job, a title, a way for Sabrina and Mitchell to get their hooks into him, to make him dependent on their world, a way to control him, and he couldn't see it. He was so blinded by her, so eager to please his new sophisticated family, that he willingly gave up the one thing that made him who he was. From that day, my son became a stranger. He became their puppet, their inside man, their designated heir. He was the key they needed to unlock my life's work. And as I sat in that hospital waiting room, I looked at his broken face and felt a deep, cold sadness. They hadn't just tried to poison me. They had already poisoned my son long ago. The moment Leo joined Mitchell's fake company, the pressure started. It wasn't just a change, it was a campaign. It began subtly over our strained Sunday dinners. Dad, you're working too hard, Sabrina would say, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. She'd place her perfectly manicured hand on Leo's. Leo worries about you constantly. Don't you, darling? Leo would just nod like the dutiful puppet he had become. She's right, Dad. You're 71, you should be enjoying yourself. You don't need to be in the office every day. I'd just sip my wine. The office is what I enjoy, Leo. A week later, the suggestion became a request. Dad, Leo started, clearly rehearsed. I've been thinking. I'm learning so much about high-level management with Mitch. I think I'm ready to take on more responsibility at Shaw Tech. Maybe I could, take over operations. I almost laughed. Operations. Leo, you were an engineer. You know nothing about running a multinational tech company. Sabrina jumped in, her smile tightening. Don't be modest, Leo. You have vision. That's what your father needs. Fresh eyes. My eyes are just fine, I said flatly. The company is not a toy, Sabrina. Then about 2 months ago, the requests for money began. They didn't call it money. They called it capital. Dad, Leo ambushed me in my own home, bringing Sabrina and Mitch with him. It was a planned intervention. "We have a massive opportunity," Mitch announced, spreading blueprints for a non-existent resort on my coffee table. "We just need a little bridge loan to get it started, a sign of good faith." "How much faith?" I asked, staring him down. $5 million, Sabrina said, as if she were asking for $5. "It's nothing for you, Greg, and we'll pay you back with interest, of course." "No," I said. The room went cold. Sabrina's face twitched. "No, what do you mean no?" "I mean no. I'm not investing in this." I gestured to the fake blueprints. "My money stays where it is." Mitch's mask of civility slipped. "Now see here, Greg. This is a family matter. We are trying to build an empire for your son." "My son had a career, I said, "before you gave him a fake title and a fantasy. The answer is no." They left in a fury. The silence that followed lasted for a week. Then came the final, desperate push. It was Sabrina who called me. Leo was probably too ashamed. "Greg," she said, her voice like ice, "we've been very patient. We are trying to help you secure your legacy. But you're being stubborn. You're too attached. Get to the point, Sabrina. Sell the company," she said. I was silent. "Sell it," she repeated faster this time. "Liquidate. Take the cash. It's too much for one old man to manage. Think of the $47 million, Greg. Think of what we could all do with it. We could all finally relax. Leo could manage your retirement portfolio." That's when I knew. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. And desperate people don't just ask. They take. "You know, Sabrina," I said, "that's a very interesting idea. Let me think about it." I hung up the phone. I knew then that my life was in danger. And I knew I had to set the trap. So I called my lawyers and told them, "Start the sale, now." No. I am not a naive old man. Did they really look at my gray hair at my 71 years and see a fool? Did they think that after 40 years of navigating the cutthroat world of technology, of building an empire from a garage, that I would be taken down by a greedy consultant and a shopaholic? I didn't build Shaw Tech by trusting smiling faces. The moment Leo, my son, quit his engineering job to take that fake project manager position at Mitchell's firm, I made a call. It wasn't to my lawyer, not yet. It was to Ben Carter. Ben has been my chief financial officer for 30 years. He's a man who trusts numbers, not people. He doesn't believe in synergy or vision. He believes in balance sheets, and he knew exactly who to call. The man Ben hired wasn't the kind of man you find in the phone book. His name was Jensen, ex-military intelligence. He specialized in corporate espionage and finding the rot underneath the foundation. I met him in a quiet diner in a part of town I rarely visit. I didn't have to say much. I slid a file across the table. "My son's new family, Mitchell Conrad, Sabrina Conrad. I want to know everything, their finances, their associates, their weaknesses." Jensen didn't take notes. He just listened. He drank his black coffee, nodded once, and left. That was 4 months ago. The first report landed on my desk 2 weeks later. It was a thin 10-page file, but every word was devastating. Mitchell Conrad. Conrad Global. It wasn't a company. It was a house of cards. Jensen's report showed a network of shell corporations, massive unpaid loans, and a list of very angry private investors. Mitchell wasn't just in trouble. He was on the verge of total collapse. He was running a classic Ponzi scheme, using new investor money to pay off the old ones, all while living a life of absurd luxury. He needed cash, and he needed it now. He didn't just want my money. He needed it to stay out of a federal prison. And then there was Sabrina. Jensen's file on her was colorful. My daughter-in-law wasn't just in debt. She was drowning in it. $200,000. Not a mortgage, not student loans. Pure high-interest credit card debt. American Express Black. Cartier. Neiman Marcus. She had leased a Maserati she couldn't afford. She had bought jewelry she couldn't pay for. She was living the life of a billionaire's heiress, all on the fumes of her father's failing empire. She was one missed payment away from her own world collapsing. They were desperate. That explained the pressure. That explained the $5 million bridge loan. That explained why they were pushing me to sell my company. But it didn't explain their plan. That came in Jensen's second report, just 1 week ago. It was a single photograph. It showed Sabrina sitting at a small table at an outdoor cafe. She was deep in conversation with a man. He looked respectable. Mid-60s, white hair, kind eyes, a doctor's face. His name was Arthur Finch. I ran the name myself through my own network. Arthur Finch wasn't just a doctor. He was an ex-doctor. His medical license had been permanently revoked 5 years earlier. The reason: gross negligence, falsifying medical records. But Jensen's report went deeper. Arthur Finch had a specialty. He had been paid handsomely by the families of several wealthy individuals to falsely diagnose them with early-onset dementia and Alzheimer's. He created fake brain scans, falsified cognitive tests, all to make it easier for the families to gain emergency power of attorney and seize their assets. When I saw that photograph, my blood ran cold. It all clicked into place. All the little comments. "Dad, are you feeling okay? You seem forgetful. Greg, you really should let Leo handle the stress. It's not good for your mind at your age. My friend's father, it was so sad. He just started losing it. They had to put him in a home for his own safety." They weren't just trying to persuade me. They were preparing to commit me. They were going to have me declared mentally incompetent. They were going to steal my company, my money, and my sanity, all in one clean legal move. So when Sabrina called me that same day and said, "Greg, have you thought any more about selling?" I smiled. And I lied. "You know what, Sabrina?" I said, "That's a wonderful idea. I'll call the brokers tomorrow." I started the sale, and I planned this party, a $47 million trap. I knew they would be impatient. I knew they couldn't resist trying to accelerate their plan to make me look confused or unwell in front of 400 witnesses. And when I saw Sabrina drop that pill into my glass, I knew Arthur Finch's prescription was about to be filled. Only it was going to the wrong patient. I was at the hospital the next morning. The police had been surprisingly efficient. After Sabrina's public hysterical confession at the party, they had officers stationed outside Mitchell's room before he even woke up. They considered him a flight risk or perhaps a target. They let me in as an involved party. I stood at the foot of the hospital bed. Mitchell Conrad looked small. The arrogance was gone, washed away, replaced by the pale, clammy skin of a sick old man. He was hooked up to a heart monitor that beeped in a steady, annoying rhythm. An IV bag dripped saline into his arm. He was awake just barely. His eyes yellowed and watery fluttered open. They struggled to focus. "Greg," he mumbled. His voice was a dry, papery rasp. What happened? You were poisoned, Mitch," I said flatly. His eyes widened in genuine confusion, but before he could respond, the door to the room hissed open. A woman in her 50s walked in, not a nurse. She wore a crisp white coat over a steel-gray suit. Her face was sharp, intelligent, and held an expression of profound impatience. Her badge read, "Dr. Alani, Chief of Toxicology." She was holding a file. "Mr. Shaw?" she asked, looking at me. "Yes, I'm Gregory Shaw. I know who he is," she said, cutting me off. She looked at Mitchell with the cold, detached gaze of a scientist. "I'm Dr. Alani. The police asked me to personally consult on Mr. Conrad's case. And I have to say, What we found is clinically fascinating. Fascinating, I asked. He almost died. Oh no, she corrected me, instantly opening the file. He was never in danger of dying. That's what's so interesting. The dose he ingested was massive, yes. It was designed to incapacitate, to shock the system. But the drug itself, olanzapine. I shook my head. I've never heard of it. You wouldn't unless you were a psychiatrist, she said. It's a powerful antipsychotic. We use it to treat severe schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. In high doses, it's a heavy-duty chemical restraint. It sedates, confuses. But here's the thing. She pulled a printout from the file. Your daughter-in-law didn't just grab this from a family member's medicine cabinet. The pill she used was a custom compounded high-potency version, not commercially available. This was specialized. So she was trying to kill him, I stated. Dr. Alani shook her head, a small, impatient sigh. That's the paradox. A massive dose like this, it's messy. It's shocking. It looks like a violent assault. But this specific drug, it has another far more insidious off-label use. I waited. The beeping of Mitch's heart monitor seemed to get louder in the silence. She looked from me to Mitch, who was now listening with a dawning, slack-jawed terror. You see, Mr. Shaw, she said, in a massive dose, olanzapine just knocks you out. It causes seizures like the one Mr. Conrad experienced. But in small, chronic doses administered over weeks, hidden in a morning coffee, or mixed into a daily vitamin, it does something else entirely. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the sterile room. It mimics the exact clinical symptoms of rapid-onset dementia. My blood turned to ice. I physically recoiled. I felt the air leave my lungs as if I'd been punched. All those little comments from Sabrina and Leo flashed through my mind suddenly, coalescing into a single horrifying image. Dad, are you feeling okay? You seem forgetful. You're confused, Greg. You already told me that story. It's not good for your mind at your age, Dad. You need to rest. It starts with confusion. Dr. Alani continued, her voice a relentless scalpel. Then short-term memory loss, paranoia, slurred speech, emotional volatility. To an outside observer, especially a doctor who wants to see it, or one who is being paid to see it, it looks exactly like Alzheimer's. I sank into the hard plastic visitor's chair. My God, I whispered. I looked at Mitch. He was staring at the doctor, his face ashen. He knew. Of course he knew. He was part of it. This was their plan all along. They weren't trying to murder me, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Dr. Alani looked at me, her sharp eyes finally showing a flicker of sympathy. No, Mr. Shaw, she said softly. They weren't trying to kill you. They were trying to erase you. They were going to have me declared mentally incompetent. The party. The $47 million announcement. It must have accelerated their timeline. They couldn't wait for the slow, chronic poisoning. They needed a public spectacle. They gave me a massive dose, hoping I would collapse on that stage, drooling, incoherent, raving. A crazy old man having a psychotic break in front of 400 witnesses. It would have been the perfect justification. We have to put him in a home, for his own safety. And they would have gained control of everything. It wasn't a clumsy attempt at murder. It was a brilliant, diabolical plan to steal my life while I was still breathing. I sank back into that hard plastic chair. The beeping of Mitchell's heart monitor faded into a dull roar in my ears. Dr. Alani's words were still hanging in the air, cold and sharp as sterile steel. It mimics the exact clinical symptoms of rapid-onset dementia. My God, my entire world, the last 6 months of my life, suddenly violently snapped into focus. It wasn't a clumsy assassination plot. It was never about killing me. A simple bullet would have been kinder. This was systematic. It was the complete and total annihilation of me. They didn't want my corpse. They wanted my name, my signature, my power, all wielded by them while I sat drooling in a padded room legally erased. All those little comments, all those moments of manufactured concern I had brushed aside. "Dad, are you feeling okay? You seem forgetful." That was Leo 3 weeks ago after I misplaced my car keys, the keys Sabrina had helpfully found for me later, right where I always left them. "Greg, you really should let Leo handle the stress. It's not good for your mind at your age." That was Mitchell at dinner after I questioned a discrepancy in a report he showed me. My friend's father. It was so sad. He just started losing it. They had to put him in a home. For his own safety, you know. That was Sabrina, her voice like honey, her eyes like ice. They were gaslighting me. They were planting the seeds. I could see their original plan clear as day. It was a slow burn, a masterpiece of cruelty. They would have started small. A tiny bit of that powder in my morning coffee every day for weeks. I would have started to get confused. I'd miss an appointment. I'd forget a name. I'd slur my words at a board meeting. And they would be right there, my loving family, to catch me. "Oh, Dad, you're just tired." "Don't worry, Greg, I'll handle that meeting for you." "Leo, darling, I think we need to call a doctor. I'm so worried about him." And who would they call, of course? Arthur Finch, the disgraced doctor Sabrina had been meeting with. He'd come in with his kind, compassionate eyes. He'd run his tests. He'd shake his head gravely. "I'm so sorry, Leo, Sabrina," he would say. "It looks like classic rapid onset dementia. He's a danger to himself. He can't be trusted with his own affairs." Then they would stage the intervention. They would sit me down in my own living room, their faces masks of deep, sorrowful concern. They would tell me they loved me. They would tell me this was for my own good. They would have a judge friendly to their lawyers, sign the papers. Power of attorney. Guardianship. They would seize control of Shaw Tech. They would seize my bank accounts. They would liquidate everything. And they would put me in the most expensive, most secure, most isolated nursing home they could find for my own safety. And I would be gone. A ghost in my own life. The world would see Gregory Shaw, the tech visionary, reduced to a babbling, incompetent old man, while his loving family, reluctantly, managed his vast empire. It was perfect. It was patient. It was evil. But I ruined it. I ruined it by selling the company. I sold it too fast. I called the brokers. I set the price. I signed the deal in 72 hours, $47 million. Suddenly, their patient long-term plan was worthless. They didn't have weeks. The sale liquidated everything. It converted my assets, my company, into cold, hard cash. Cash that was sitting in my bank account under my control. They panicked. They needed a new plan. A plan that was fast, public, and undeniable. And that's what last night was. The party. It wasn't a celebration for them. It was an opportunity. Their last desperate chance. They couldn't slowly build a case for my dementia anymore. They had to create the event. One massive dose. Not to kill me, but to make me have a complete psychotic breakdown in front of 400 of the city's most influential people. I could see it happening in my mind's eye. I would have stood on that stage, my company sold, my fortune secured, and I would have started raving. I would have collapsed. I would have slurred my words, become violent, paranoid, incoherent. It would have been a tragedy. Poor Greg Shaw. The stress finally broke him. Sabrina and Leo would have rushed to my side, the perfect distraught children. The doctors. They warned us this might happen. He's been so confused lately. They would have had Arthur Finch on standby. He'd be the family friend in the audience who graciously stepped in to administer a sedative. They would have had an ambulance, not a hearse, waiting outside. By midnight, I would have been committed. By Monday morning, they would have been in court with a dozen witness statements from my own party, all confirming my public catastrophic mental collapse. They would have had guardianship by noon. It wasn't a clumsy attempt at murder. It was a brilliant last-minute pivot. And it almost worked. It would have worked if they hadn't underestimated the old man they were trying to erase. I left the hospital an hour later. I didn't stay to watch Mitch wake up. I didn't need to. I already had what I needed. I was in my study, a room they hadn't bothered to enter in years, surrounded by old books and schematics. I was staring at the wall, seeing the pieces of their plan click into place. The dementia, the public spectacle, the disgraced doctor. When my phone buzzed on the desk, it was Leo. I let it ring 3 times, then picked up. "Hello, Leo." "Dad." His voice wasn't just panicked. It was hysterical. It was the shriek of a man whose entire world was not just collapsing, but actively on fire. "Dad, you have to come home right now." "It's Sabrina." I stayed silent. I waited. She's going crazy. You have to come home and fix this. She's threatening to call the police." I gripped the phone. "The police? Why would she do that, Leo? She's saying you did it," he wailed. "She's screaming. She's telling her mother, she's telling everyone, that you poisoned Mitch on purpose." Ah, there it was. It was beautiful in its own sociopathic way. A perfect pivot. Plan A, having me declared incompetent, had failed. It had blown up in their faces at the party, so they had immediately seamlessly shifted to Plan B. If they couldn't make me the victim, they would make me the villain. "She's saying you knew." Leo was almost sobbing into the phone. "She's saying you found out about the pill, and you let her do it, just so you could swap the glasses and poison Mitch. She's saying you wanted to frame her to get rid of her and her father. She's saying you are the monster." It was brilliant. They would use her own public hysterical confession. That was your glass. You swapped it as the foundation of their new lie. It wasn't a confession. It was an accusation. They would paint me as a cold, calculating puppet master, a 71-year-old man who would sacrifice his son's father-in-law just to get rid of a daughter-in-law he didn't like. They would destroy my reputation, tie me up in legal battles, and drain my accounts fighting a criminal charge. It was just another way to win. "She's out of control, Dad," Leo pleaded. "You have to talk to her. You're the only one who can calm her down." The bait was set. They needed me to come back to the house, their territory. And then Leo said the words that confirmed everything. She called someone, a professional. She said you need help, that you're having delusions. She invited a doctor, a specialist, to the house, to talk to you. He's on his way. Please, Dad, just come home and talk to him. Please. A doctor, of course. Arthur Finch, the disgraced specialist in dementia. The trap was set. They were pushing the original plan, but with a new vicious twist. They were going to have me declared incompetent and a criminal all at once. "All right, Leo," I said, my voice trembling just the right amount. "I'm on my way. No lawyers, just family." I hung up, and I immediately called Ben Carter. "Ben," I said, "it's time. They're all at the house, and they've brought their fake doctor." I checked my reflection in the dark glass of my study window. "Get the team ready, and make sure the cameras are rolling before I walk in the door." I walked up the stone path to my own front door. The house I built. The house where I raised my son. It was silent. Too silent. Ben Carter and his team were already inside. My investigator Jensen had disarmed the alarm system 2 days ago and installed his own audio and video surveillance in the living room. They were waiting in my study, the one room in the house Sabrina never entered because it was too dusty. I put my key in the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. The air inside was cold. I walked into the living room, and there they were, a tribunal. Leo was sitting on the edge of the ottoman, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Annette Mitchell's wife sat in my favorite leather armchair, as if it were her throne, her expression a mask of smug concern. And Sabrina. She was standing by the fireplace, the grieving, terrified wife. The moment I walked in, she visibly flinched and took a half step back, a perfect performance of a woman afraid of her abuser. Sitting opposite them in a formal wingback chair was a man I had never met, but whose face I knew intimately. He was in his mid-60s with kind silver hair and a deeply compassionate expression. He wore a crisp white shirt and a bow tie, looking every bit the seasoned, empathetic professional. "Dad," Leo said, his voice cracking as he stood up. "Thank God you're here. This is Dr. Weissman." Dr. Weissman. That's what they were calling him. I stared at him. I knew his real name, Arthur Finch. I knew his specialty. I knew his price. Jensen's report had included every detail right down to the lawsuit that had cost him his medical license. He stood up and approached me, extending a hand. His handshake was firm, warm, and utterly fake. "Gregory," he said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm so glad you agreed to talk with us." "My son," he said. It was urgent, I replied, playing my part. I looked around, confused. "What is all this, Sabrina? Annette, what's going on?" Sabrina burst into tears, perfect, right on cue. "We're worried about you, Greg," she sobbed, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "We're so worried." Dr. Finch, Weissman, guided me to the sofa as if I were a fragile child. "Please sit. Gregory, your family loves you very much. They've called me here because they've noticed some concerning behaviors. They're worried you're not well." I looked at Leo. "Behaviors? What? What behaviors, son?" Leo couldn't look at me. He just stared at his shoes. "It's okay, Leo," Finch said, taking control. "This is difficult." He turned back to me, his face a perfect picture of clinical concern. "Gregory, your son tells me you've been experiencing periods of paranoia, confusion. He says you've been making accusations, lashing out." I don't understand," I stammered. "Last night," Sabrina said, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. You attacked my father. You tried to poison him." "What? No!" I said, my voice rising in mock panic. "That's not true. It was an accident. I don't know what happened." "You see?" Finch said softly, nodding to Leo. "Denial, aggression. It's a classic presentation." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a hypnotic, patronizing coo. "Gregory, listen to me. Your daughter-in-law saw you. She saw you swap the glasses. She knows you did it intentionally. She believes you are a danger to her and to yourself." But she..." I pointed at Sabrina. "She's the one who said..." "Who said what, Gregory?" Finch pressed gently. "Who said what?" "She said you swapped the glasses. Why would she make that up?" This was the trap. My word against hers. The word of a confused, paranoid old man against his terrified, grieving daughter-in-law. She's lying," I insisted, my voice rising. "And now her father is in the hospital." Finch continued, ticking off items on a mental checklist. "She says you've been obsessed with her finances, that you've been following her, that you're convinced she's part of some conspiracy against you." "But she is," I shouted, realizing my outburst was playing right into their hands. "Greg," Finch said, his voice suddenly sharp, authoritative. "Stop. You are not well. You are experiencing a severe paranoid delusion. Your family is here to help you. We've already spoken to the judge at the probate court. We have a car waiting outside. We're going to take you to a private clinic where you can be evaluated, where you can be safe. There it was. The final move. They weren't just intervening. They were committing me. Right now. They had the fake doctor, the false testimony, and I was sure a stack of forged documents ready for a signature. No, I said, shrinking back. I won't go, you can't make me. Sabrina stood up, her fake tears gone, replaced by a cold, hard finality. We can, Greg, and we will. It's for your own good. But I didn't do anything wrong, I pleaded. Sabrina, just tell them the truth. Tell them what you did. Sabrina let out a cold, sharp laugh. What I did nothing but try to love you. And you repaid me by trying to murder my father. She was so close to the finish line. So arrogant. She thought she had won. But, I saw you. I whispered the final desperate gambit. I saw you put the pill in my glass. Sabrin's face twitched. She looked at Finch, who gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He's cornered. Finish him. Sabrina stepped toward me, her face inches from mine. You saw nothing, old man, she hissed, her voice low and venomous, forgetting just for a second that she was supposed to be the victim. And even if you did, who are they going to believe, me, or the confused, violent old man who just poisoned my father? She smiled. Checkmate. That, I said, my voice suddenly clear, calm, and strong, is an excellent question. I looked past her toward the door of my study. Ben. Did you get all that? Sabrina froze. Her smile vanished. What? The study door opened, and the entire trap snapped shut. I held the phone to my ear, listening to my son's desperate, sniveling plea. He's on his way. Please, Dad, just come home and talk to him. The trap was fully set. The fake doctor, the false accusations, the waiting car. They were going to have me committed. My heart was pounding, but not with fear, with anticipation. I let out a long, shaky breath, making sure the microphone picked it up. Dr. Leo, I don't think I'm sick. My voice was a whisper, the sound of a terrified, confused old man. He's just here to talk, Dad, Leo insisted, his voice cracking. To help Sabrina is just... she's scared. We're all scared, please. All right, I said, my voice breaking. All right, son. I'll come home. Oh, thank God, Dad. But no lawyers, right? I pleaded, feeding him the line I knew he wanted. I don't want any trouble. Just family. You promise? Yes, yes. Leo said, the relief in his voice palpable. No lawyers, just family. Just come home. Please, we'll fix this. I'm on my way, I whispered, and I hung up. The silence in my study was absolute. I put the phone down on the antique mahogany desk. The tremor in my voice, the fear, the confusion, it all vanished. My hand was perfectly steady. My breathing was slow and even. The mask of the senile old man dropped to the floor. The man who picked up the phone for the second call was not the man who had just spoken to Leo. I dialed Ben Carter's private number. He picked up on the first ring. Greg, Ben, I said. My voice cold, clear, and sharp as a scalpel. It's time. There was no surprise in Ben's voice. We had prepared for this. They're moving on you. Leo just called. The intervention is set. They have their fake doctor waiting for me at the house right now. The plan is to have me committed tonight. My team is 5 minutes out, Ben said. Jensen is already monitoring the live feed from the study. He'll have eyes on you the second you walk in. Good, I said. This is what we wanted. They're all in one place, but this has moved beyond a simple fraud accusation, Ben. They tried to poison Mitch. They are going to accuse me of it. They are playing for keeps. So are we, Ben replied. What do you need? Not just your security team, I said, standing up and straightening my jacket. Call your contact at the precinct. I want uniformed officers. I want them parked one street over, ready to move on my signal. I want this official, Ben. I want this clean. Understood. We'll have 2 patrol cars and my 2 plainclothes security guys. Excellent, I said. I'm walking in alone. I want them to feel completely in control. I want them to make their move. I want them to say everything on camera. Greg, it's risky, Ben warned. It's not risky, I said, walking towards the door. It's a performance, and they have no idea I've been reading their script for months. Tell your team to wait for my signal. What's the signal? Ben asked. I paused my hand on the doorknob. You'll know it when you hear it, Ben. I'm going in. I put my key in the lock. The click of the tumbler turning was unnaturally loud in the silence. I pushed the door open. The air in my own home was cold, stale. They had been waiting. I walked into the living room and my steps faltered. This wasn't a family gathering. It was a tribunal. Leo, my son, was perched on the edge of the ottoman, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were bone white. He was staring at the carpet, refusing to look at me. Annette Mitchell's wife was sitting in my leather armchair, the one my late wife had bought me. She had claimed the seat of power, her face a mask of smug, sorrowful concern. Sabrina was standing by the fireplace, dressed in a soft cashmere sweater, the picture of a fragile victim. The moment I entered, she physically flinched, taking a small, practiced step backward, as if afraid I might strike her. And sitting directly across from the doorway in the formal wingback chair was a man I had never seen in person, but whose face I knew intimately. He was in his mid-60s, with a kind, handsome face, silver hair brushed perfectly to the side, and a deeply compassionate expression. He wore a tweed jacket, a crisp white shirt, and a bow tie. He looked like every fantasy of the perfect, caring psychiatrist. I knew his name was Arthur Finch. I knew his license had been revoked. I knew he specialized in fabricating dementia diagnoses for cash. Dad, Leo said, his voice cracking. He jumped up from the ottoman. Thank God you're here. We were so worried. He wouldn't meet my eyes. This is Dr. Weissman. Weissman. A new name. Of course. Arthur Finch stood up. He approached me slowly, as one would approach a frightened animal. He extended a warm, firm hand. Gregory, he said, his voice a smooth, deep baritone, the kind of voice designed to inspire absolute trust. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm so glad you agreed to talk with us. He was already setting the frame. That I was the patient. That I had agreed to this. I let my hand tremble in his. I don't understand, I stammered, playing my part. I looked around at the grim faces. Leo, what is all this? Sabrina, Annette, what's going on? On cue. Sabrina burst into tears. It was a flawless performance. Not loud, just a choked, desperate sobbing into a tissue she already had prepared. We're worried about you, Greg, she cried. We're so worried. Annette nodded grimly, dabbing at her own perfectly dry eyes. Dr. Finch guided me to the sofa. His hand on my elbow was patronizing, proprietary. Please sit, Gregory. Your family loves you very much. They are here because they love you. I sat. The trap was set. They've called me here, Finch continued, sitting across from me, because they've noticed some concerning behaviors. They're worried you're not well, Gregory. I looked at Leo. Behaviors? What? What behaviors, son? Leo just shook his head, looking down at his shoes, the picture of a heartbroken son. Sabrina spoke, her voice thick with fake tears. Last night, she whispered, at the party, you tried to poison my father. I recoiled, my face a mask of shock. What? No, that's not true. I would never. It was an accident. I don't know what happened, I swear. My voice was pitched high, frantic, defensive. Finch nodded slowly, gravely, looking at Leo and Annette. You see, denial, aggression. It's a classic presentation. It's not your fault, Gregory. It's the illness. Illness, I stammered. I'm not ill. Finch leaned forward, his voice dropping to a hypnotic, patronizing coo. Gregory, listen to me. Your daughter-in-law saw you. She saw you swap the glasses. She knows you did it intentionally. She believes you are a danger to her, a danger to her father, a danger to yourself. But she's the one. I pointed a trembling finger at Sabrina. I saw her. She's the one who what, Gregory? Finch pressed his voice sharp like a surgeon. Who did what, Sabrina? Why would she poison her own father? Do you hear how that sounds? It sounds paranoid. He had me. My word against hers. The word of a confused, grieving old man against the terrified daughter. And now, Finch continued, his tone shifting, her father is in the hospital. Sabrina tells me you've been obsessed with her finances, that you've been making accusations convinced she's part of some conspiracy against you. But she is, I shouted. I knew the outburst was exactly what he wanted. I knew I was playing my part perfectly. Greg, Finch said, his voice suddenly firm, authoritative. Stop. You are not well. You are experiencing a severe paranoid delusion. This is beyond our help here. He looked at Leo. Son, it's as we discussed. He's a danger. It's time. Leo looked up, his face pale as death. Finch turned back to me. Gregory, your family is here to help you. We've already spoken to the probate court. We have a car waiting outside. We're going to take you to a private clinic, a quiet place, Westview Hills, where you can be evaluated, where you can be safe. There it was, the final move. The intervention was a commitment. They weren't asking, they were telling. They had the fake doctor, the false testimony, and I was sure a stack of forged documents ready for a judge. No, I said, shrinking back into the sofa, playing the cornered animal. I'm not going anywhere. You can't make me. This is my house. Sabrina stood up. Her fake tears were gone. Her face was cold, hard, and final. We can, Greg, she said. And we will. It's for your own good. We have the authority. I didn't do anything wrong, I pleaded, my voice breaking. I looked at her, my last desperate gambit. Sabrina, just tell them the truth. Please tell them what you did. Sabrina's face twitched. She looked at Finch. The doctor gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He's cornered. Finish him. Sabrina stepped toward me. She kneeled as if comforting me, but her face was inches from mine. Her eyes were devoid of all warmth. You saw nothing, old man, she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper, forgetting just for a second that she was supposed to be the victim. And even if you did, who are they going to believe, me? Or the confused, violent old man who just poisoned my father? She smiled. Checkmate. She thought she had won. That, I said, my voice suddenly clear, calm, and strong, is an excellent question. I looked past her toward the open door of my study. Ben, did you get all that? Arthur Finch, Dr. Weissman, took charge of the room. He was a master of his craft, all smooth edges and compassionate steel. Gregory, he began, his voice a deep, soothing baritone. Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult. Your son Leo called me. He's deeply worried about you. He gestured to Leo. Leo looked up, his eyes bloodshot, and then looked away as if the very act of seeing me caused him pain. A perfect filial performance. I felt a cold, sharp anger, but I buried it. I needed to be the man they wanted me to be. I needed to be confused. Worried, I said, my voice trembling just enough. Worried about what I don't understand. Leo, what is this? Finch didn't let him answer. He held up a calming hand. It's all right, Gregory. We're here to talk. Leo tells me you've been under a significant amount of stress, that you've been experiencing periods of, well, confusion, paranoia even. Paranoia. I let my voice crack with indignation. I'm not paranoid. Finch gave a sad, sympathetic nod, as if I had just confirmed his diagnosis. That's a very common response. Please, no one is accusing you. We are concerned. Sabrina, who had been crying softly into her tissue, looked up. He thinks I'm trying to hurt him, doctor. She whispered, her voice breaking beautifully. He thinks I'm trying to steal from him. He's been accusing me of... She couldn't finish, dissolving back into sobs. It's okay, Sabrina, Finch said, patting her shoulder. He turned back to me. You see, Gregory, this is what we mean. You've been fixating on your daughter-in-law, a persecutory delusion. It's a classic presentation. The patient often latches onto the person closest to them, the one they see as a caregiver. Caregiver. The word was so grotesque, so deeply false, it almost made me laugh. This woman who had just tried to chemically induce dementia in me was being painted as my selfless nurse. But she's lying, I stammered. I'm not, and then, Finch continued, his voice growing more somber. There was last night, the party. He paused, letting the silence in the room build. Sabrina is, well, frankly, she's terrified for her safety, Gregory. She believes you intentionally and with premeditation tried to harm her father. My heart was pounding a steady, cold rhythm. Here it was. Plan B, the new narrative. She says, Finch continued, looking down at a completely blank legal pad on his lap, as if consulting notes, that you have become obsessed with her and her father, that you've made veiled threats, and that last night in a fit of paranoid rage you swapped your champagne glass with Mr. Conrad's. No, I shouted, standing up. That's not what happened. She put something in my glass. I saw her. Finch stood up with me, his movements slow, non-threatening. Gregory, please, sit down. His voice was firm now, the doctor taking charge. Aggression, lashing out, blame shifting. These are all part of the syndrome. You are not well. We are not here to accuse you. We are here to help you. Syndrome. A lovely non-specific word, vague enough to be meaningless, clinical enough to be terrifying. He's been like this for months. Annette, the mother-in-law, chimed in, her voice sharp. Asking strange questions, obsessing over our family's finances. It's not normal. The obsession with finances, Finch repeated, nodding. The forgetfulness, he asked, looking at Leo. Leo just nodded, misery radiating from him. My keys, I thought. The keys Sabrina had found for me in the refrigerator. A plant. The isolation from your family, Finch pressed. My avoidance of their toxic Sunday dinners. And now, this, Finch said, gesturing around the room. This terrible event with Mr. Conrad. Gregory, Sabrina is afraid you'll try to harm her next. She believes you came here today to silence her. That is why she asked me to be here. For her protection. He had done it. In less than 5 minutes, he had painted a perfect, undeniable portrait of me as a violent, paranoid, and rapidly declining old man. He had twisted every rational act of self-defense I had taken over the past months into a symptom of my illness. He had built the cage. Now he just had to get me to walk into it. This is a nightmare, I whispered, sinking back onto the sofa. I put my head in my hands, the picture of a defeated man. It's a performance, I told myself. Stay in character. Let them make the final move. Finch sat back down. He gave Sabrina a small, satisfied look. It's not a nightmare, Gregory. It's an illness. And the first step is admitting you need help. Help? I looked up, my eyes wide with fake fear. What? What kind of help? Sabrina and Finch exchanged a glance. The kill shot was coming. We think it's time for you to rest, Greg, Sabrina said, her voice dripping with false empathy. A place where you can be safe, where you can't hurt anyone, or yourself. Finch leaned forward, his voice low and serious. Gregory, your family is here to help you. We've already spoken to the judge at the probate court. We have a car waiting outside. We're going to take you to a private clinic, a quiet place, Westview Hills, where you can be evaluated, where you can be safe. There it was. The final move. The intervention was a commitment. They weren't asking. They were telling. They had the fake doctor, the false testimony, and I was sure a stack of forged documents ready for a judge. No, I said, shrinking back. I won't go. You can't make me. This is my house. Sabrina stood up. Her fake tears were gone. Her face was cold, hard, and final. We can, Greg, she said. And we will. It's for your own good. We have the authority. I didn't do anything wrong, I pleaded, my voice breaking. I looked at her, my last desperate gambit. Sabrina, just tell them the truth. Please tell them what you did. Sabrina's face twitched. She looked at Finch. The doctor gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. He's cornered. Finish him. Sabrina stepped toward me. She kneeled as if comforting me, but her face was inches from mine. Her eyes were devoid of all warmth. You saw nothing, old man, she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper, forgetting just for a second that she was supposed to be the victim. And even if you did, who are they going to believe, me, or the confused, violent old man who just poisoned my father? She smiled. Checkmate. She thought she had won. That, I said, my voice suddenly clear, calm, and strong, is an excellent question. I looked past her toward the open door of my study. Ben, did you get all that? Sabrina froze. Her head snapped toward the study. Her eyes, which had been so cold and confident, were now wide with pure, unadulterated panic. Leo and Annette just looked confused. Ben, Leo stammered. Who's Ben? The fake Dr. Arthur Finch was the first to truly understand. His mask of compassion evaporated. His eyes darted to the front door, calculating his escape route. The study door opened slowly. Ben Carter, my CFO and the most ruthless lawyer I know, stepped out. He was holding his phone, the screen glowing. He was not alone. Behind him stepped Jensen, my private investigator, holding a professional video camera with a bright red record light glowing. And behind him, 2 uniformed police officers. They stepped into the room, their presence sucking all the air out of it. One officer casually moved to block the front door. The other stood by the study, his hand resting near his belt. Cha, Leo whispered, his voice trembling. What is this? Sabrina's face, her entire mask of control, just crumbled. It was like watching a porcelain doll crack and fall apart in seconds. Her knees buckled. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Finch, the fake doctor, tried to make a move for the hallway. I believe this is a private family matter, he said, his voice suddenly squeaky. The officer by the door just shook his head. I wouldn't, sir. Please have a seat. Ben Carter walked to the center of the room and looked at Sabrina. His voice was calm, cold, and final. We got all of it, Greg, he said to me. Then he looked directly at Sabrina. Every single word. We got your specific, uncoerced confession phone to spiking your father-in-law's drink at the party. We got your admission that you swapped the glasses to frame him. And we got your conspiracy with Mr. Arthur Finch here. He gestured to the fake doctor. To have Gregory Shaw falsely committed based on manufactured evidence. Sabrina finally found her voice, but it was a desperate, hysterical shriek. This is illegal! You can't record me! You can't do this! Leo, tell them they can't do this! Actually, we can, Mrs. Shaw. Ben Carter said, his voice cutting through her hysteria. In the state of Texas, you can record a conversation as long as one party consents. He tapped his own chest. My team and I sitting in that study were a party to this conversation. He then gestured to me. Furthermore, Mr. Shaw is the sole owner of this property. He gave us full written permission to install surveillance equipment as he feared for his physical and financial safety. Given that you just confessed to a conspiracy to commit a felony against him, I'd say his fears were rather well-founded. Leo just stared his mouth open, looking back and forth between me, his wife, and the armed police officers. Conspiracy falsely. Commit. Mrs. Shaw, the first officer said, stepping forward. I'm going to have to ask you to please sit down. You too, ma'am, he said to Annette. And you, sir, he said to Finch. This is now an active investigation. Sabrina's shriek was not human. It was a raw, primal sound of pure, cornered rage. You can't do this! She screamed, lunging forward, not at me, but at Ben. You bastard! You can't! The second officer, the one who had been standing quietly by the study, moved with a speed that was shocking. He stepped directly into her path, his arm coming up to block her. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Calm? She shrieked, her voice cracking. He set me up! He set us all up! It's a lie! Annette, meanwhile, simply collapsed. She didn't faint. She just folded in on herself in the armchair, her hands covering her face as she let out a series of high-pitched, gulping sobs. No! No, this isn't happening! Mitchell! Oh God, Mitchell! The fake Dr. Arthur Finch was the only one who hadn't made a sound. He had been assessing the situation, his eyes darting from the officers to the locked front door. He was a professional, and his first instinct wasn't to fight. It was to flee. While all eyes were on Sabrina, Finch made his move. He bolted for the hallway, heading for the kitchen's back door. He didn't make it 2 steps. Police, don't move! The officer at the front door commanded, his hand already on his weapon. Finch froze instantly, his hands shooting up in the air. I'm just a consultant. He stammered, his professional calm completely gone. I was called here under false pretenses. I don't know these people. I'm sure, Ben Carter said dryly. Tell it to the detectives. This is a trap! Sabrina screamed again. She spun around, her eyes landing on Leo. He was still standing by the sofa, completely catatonic, his face the color of ash. He was staring at the video camera, which Jensen was still holding steadily, its red light an unblinking eye. Leo! Sabrina shrieked, grabbing his arm, her nails digging in. Do something, he's lying, he's trying to destroy Roy. Father is a monster, tell them. Leo didn't respond. He didn't even blink. He just stared at the camera, as if he was watching the last 3 years of his life play back in his mind. Leo, look at me, she shook him violently. Say something. You're my husband. You're supposed to protect me. When he remained silent, her rage finally turned on him. You! She spat, slapping his arm. You're useless. You've always been useless. A weak, pathetic child. That's enough, the officer said, stepping forward and taking Sabrina firmly by the arm. Ma'am, you're going to come with us. Get your hands off me, she thrashed, but the officer's grip was like steel. You're making a mistake, Annette wailed from the chair. You don't know who we are, my husband will, he will end you. Your husband, ma'am, Ben Carter said, checking his phone, is currently being read his Miranda rights in the ICU of St. Jude's Hospital. It seems the SEC and the FBI decided to coordinate their efforts tonight. That was the final blow. Annette's wail cut off into a strangled gasp. Sabrina stopped fighting. She just stopped. She looked at me, her eyes no longer filled with rage, but with a cold, terrifying emptiness. The con was over. The game was lost. And in that moment, all that was left was the truth. A trap. Ben Carter repeated, his voice cutting through the room with the sharp, clean sound of breaking glass. Mrs. Shaw, you give us far too much credit. We didn't need to trap you. He stepped forward, placing a thick 4-inch binder on my mahogany coffee table. The sound it made was a heavy final thud. You, your mother, and Mr. Finch. You're just the small, messy local part of this, Ben said. We were after something much, much bigger. He looked at Leo, who was still staring at his wife, the word conspiracy still hanging on his lips. Leo, Ben said, his voice softening just a fraction. For the past 4 months, your father hasn't just been investigating your wife. He's been investigating your father-in-law, Mitchell Conrad. Mitch, Leo whispered. What does he have to do with this? Everything, Ben said. He tapped the binder. You thought your father-in-law's company, Conrad Global, was a legitimate consulting firm. You thought you were a project manager. You weren't. There is no Conrad Global. Not really. Sabrina let out a strangled noise, a mix between a sob and a laugh. You're lying. It's a holding company. It's a house of cards, Sabrina, Ben said, his voice dropping. It's a classic textbook Ponzi scheme. And the person who filed the whistleblower complaint that triggered the SEC investigation was your father. I watched my son's face. He didn't understand. He couldn't. SEC, Leo murmured. The Securities and Exchange Commission. Leo, I said, speaking for the first time. The federal government. Ben Carter opened the binder. It was filled with spreadsheets, bank flow charts, and offshore account numbers. Mitchell Conrad hasn't made a legitimate dollar in over a decade. Ben explained, his voice a calm, relentless monotone. He's been paying his old investors, like that city councilman at the party, with money he gets from new investors. He's been promising 30% returns on real estate projects in Dubai, projects that do not exist. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and handed it to the lead police officer. That's a copy of the wire transfer. Mitchell is currently $82 million in the red. He's been insolvent for 3 years. He's been using your wife. He turned to Sabrina. You weren't just the vice president of finance, were you, Mrs. Shaw? You were the money launderer. Your signature is on every one of these offshore transfers. You've been helping your father falsify quarterly reports, create fake profit statements, and lie to federal investigators for years. No, Sabrina screamed. That's business. It's complicated. You don't understand. Oh, I think we do, Ben said. We understand that your $200,000 in credit card debt wasn't your real problem. That was just spending money. Your real problem is the $82 million hole you and your father were about to be buried in. He looked back at me. Greg, you asked me why they were so desperate, why they moved so fast. Here's why. He pulled out another document. This is an internal memo from the SEC. A full forensic audit of Conrad Global was scheduled to begin this coming Monday. Tomorrow. In less than 24 hours. Sabrina's legs gave out. She physically sagged against the officer who was holding her arm. They were out of time, I said, the final horrible piece clicking into place. Completely, Ben confirmed. They had no more new investors. The well was dry. They were staring down the barrel of a federal indictment. They needed a miracle. They needed a massive, untraceable cash infusion. He pointed at me. They needed $47 million. I looked at Leo. His face was gray. He was finally seeing the truth. The sale of your company, Leo, Ben said, his voice relentless. It wasn't a retirement plan for them. It was their only lifeline. It was the money they were going to use to plug the $82 million hole, to pay off just enough investors to pass the audit to make it all go away. They weren't trying to get rich, Leo, I said softly. They were trying to stay out of prison. And that, Ben said, closing the binder, is why they couldn't just ask for the money. Greg would have refused. He would have seen the fraud. So they had to take it. They had to accelerate their plan. The olanzapine, the fake doctor, the public commitment. It was their last desperate Hail Mary pass. They had to have Greg declared mentally incompetent before Monday morning, Ben finished, so they could get legal control of his $47 million, so they could make the transfer, so they could pay off their victims and save themselves. The room was silent. The only sound was the clicking of the officer's radio and Annette's quiet, gasping sobs. It wasn't about greed, Leo whispered, his voice full of a terrible, childlike disbelief. I put my hand on my son's shoulder. No, son, I said. It was never just about greed. It was about survival. And they were perfectly willing to sacrifice my mind, my entire life, to save their own. I looked at my son, Leo. He was still processing the words Ponzi scheme and federal prison. His entire reality was disintegrating. They ran out of time, I said, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. Sabrina, who was still being held by the officer, looked up. Her eyes were no longer just angry. They were dead. She knew I had them. Annette, I said, turning to the mother-in-law, who was still sobbing in the armchair. You knew, didn't you? You knew the SEC audit of Conrad Global was scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, Monday. Annette's sobs hitched. She refused to look at me. That's what this was all about, I said, my voice resonating with the full, cold power I had hidden for so long. It was never just about getting rich. It was about survival. I walked over to the coffee table and placed my hand on the thick binder Ben had brought. $82 million in fraud. Do you know what that gets you, Leo? 25 to life. Minimum. For your wife. For your father-in-law. I looked at Sabrina. You were out of time. The well was dry, no new investors, no more money to move around. You were staring at the end of your entire world. You were going to prison. You all were. I let that sink in. The police officers stood silently by the door. Jensen's camera was still rolling, capturing every second. And then, I continued, I gave you a miracle. I don't, Leo stammered. I sold my company, I said. $47 million, cash, liquid, sitting in my personal bank account. I looked at Sabrina. It wasn't a retirement fund for you to look forward to. It was a lifeline. It was the only money in the world you could get your hands on fast before that Monday morning audit. It was the money you were going to use to plug that $82 million hole to pay off just enough of your angriest victims to pass the audit and make it all go away. Sabrina's breath was coming in short, sharp gasps. You didn't just want my money, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. You needed it. You needed it to stay out of jail. And that, I said, turning back to my son, is why last night happened. That's why they couldn't just ask for the money. I would have seen the fraud. I would have asked questions. I would have said no. So you had to take it, Ben Carter added, stepping forward. You had to accelerate your plan. You couldn't wait for a slow chronic poisoning. You needed him declared incompetent this weekend. I nodded. They needed me in a padded room by Sunday night, so they, I pointed to Sabrina, could get emergency guardianship by 9 a.m. tomorrow, so they could walk into the bank with a court order, access my account, and make the transfer. They were going to steal my $47 million to cover up their $82 million crime. I looked at Leo, my son, my only child, his face a gray hollow mask of despair. "It wasn't just greed, son," I said. "It was fear. They were perfectly willing to sacrifice my mind, my freedom, my entire life, just to save their own skin." The silence in the room was absolute. It was thick, heavy, and suffocating. Leo was just standing there, a statue of a man, his face gray. Annette was sobbing into her hands. The fake Dr. Finch was staring at the floor, defeated. And then, a sound. It started as a small, sharp giggle. It was Sabrina. She was still standing in the officer's grip, but her head was tilted back and she was laughing. The giggle grew, swelling into a loud, hysterical, unhinged cackle that echoed off the high ceilings of my living room. It was a terrible, broken sound. "Oh, Greg," she gasped, wiping a tear from her eye, though this was not a tear of sadness. "Oh, you are something." She looked at me, her eyes wide and glittering with a terrifying, wild energy. The con was over, and the madness was all that was left. "You won!" she shrieked, the laugh bubbling up again. "Congratulations, you did it. You get to keep all your precious money." She looked around the room, at the cops, at Ben, at my investigator. "Look at him, the big smart man, Gregory Shaw. He beat us. He won the game." I just stood there. I didn't say a word. I just watched her. "But you know what you lost," she spat, her voice suddenly dropping into a low, venomous growl. She took a step toward me, but the officer's grip tightened. "You lost him." She nodded her head toward Leo. "You have your $47 million, old man," she hissed. "But you just lost your only son. You just lost him. Forever." Leo flinched as if she had slapped him. "He will never forgive you for this." Sabrina continued, her voice rising with a new cruel strength. "He will never forgive you for what you did to me, for what you did to us. You destroyed his wife. You destroyed his family." She turned her wild eyes on Leo. "Tell him, Leo, go on, tell him how he's a monster. Tell him who you stand with. Tell him how he tore our entire life apart, just because he couldn't stand to see you happy." She was making her last desperate play. She was trying to force him to choose, to frame me as the villain who had destroyed his life, not the man who had just saved it from a lie. Leo just trembled, his mouth opening, but no sound coming out. He was a man caught between two worlds, both of them now in ruins. Sabrina smiled, a bloody, triumphant look. "See, he hates you. You've won your money, Greg, and you will die a very rich, very lonely old man." She thought that was her final move. She thought that was the knife she could leave in me. She had no idea I had one more piece of evidence to show. "I'm not so sure about that, Sabrina," I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through her laughter and silenced the room. She stared at me, her smile faltering, her eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" I didn't answer her. I just looked past her, past the police officers, to Ben Carter, who was still standing by my study door. I gave him a single, slow nod. Ben understood. He didn't say a word. He simply tapped the screen of the tablet he was holding. On the far wall of the living room, my 80-inch smart television, which had been dark, flickered to life. "What is this?" Sabrina snapped, her voice high with sudden, real alarm. "More of your senile old tricks, Greg, a home movie." "In a way," I said. The screen resolved into a high-definition image. It was a security feed. The location was instantly recognizable to everyone in the room, my study. The time and date stamp in the corner read, October 28th, 2025. 1 week ago. In the video, Sabrina was pacing back and forth in front of my desk, her back to the hidden camera. She was on her phone. Annette, her mother, let out a small gasp. "Sabrina." On the screen, Sabrina's voice was clear, crisp, and completely different from the one she had been using all night. This was her real voice. Cold, impatient. "Dad, you need to calm down," she said, presumably to Mitchell. "I told you it's all handled. No, he's not suspicious. He's an old fool. He's so desperate for family, he'll believe anything we tell him. I watched Leo. He flinched as if he'd been struck. His eyes were glued to the screen. I know the audit is on Monday. Video, Sabrina snapped into the phone. That's why we're doing this now. Finch is ready. The second the old man is committed, I get power of attorney. I'll have the 47 million moved to the holding account before noon. It's done. You just have to hold the SEC off for one more day. Finch, the fake doctor, turned a sickly shade of gray. The police officers were watching him intently now. Listen, Sabrina on the video said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. I have to go. Leo's pulling up. God, I can't wait for this to be over. She paused, listening to something her father said on the other end. Then she laughed. It was the same cold, sharp laugh I'd heard in the restaurant, the one that had chilled me to the bone. Don't worry about Leo, she said. Leo, standing next to me, made a small choked sound. He's not a problem. He'll do whatever I say. He's weak, Dad. He's always been weak. He's so pathetic, so desperate for my approval. He'd sign his own death warrant if I told him it would make me happy. I could feel Leo trembling beside me. He wasn't just shaking. He was vibrating, his entire body seized by a silent tremor. And then the video delivered the final fatal blow. Look, video, Sabrina said. The second Greg is in Westview, and we have control of the cash I'm filing for divorce. I mean it. I can't stand to have him touch me for one more second. Leo let out a sound. It was not a word. It was a sharp, punched-out gasp, as if all the air had been forced from his lungs. On the screen, Sabrina laughed again. I know, but he was useful. We'll give him a small cut, a few $100,000. Enough to keep him quiet and make him go away. And then it's just you and me, to the Caymans. Just like we planned. The rest of our lives. She blew a kiss to the phone. Okay, I have to go be the loving wife. I'll see you tomorrow. She hung up. The video ended. The screen went black. For 10 full seconds, the only sound in the room was the quiet, horrified breathing of the police officers. Annette was staring at the black screen, her mouth wide open. Finch looked like he was going to be sick. And Sabrina was not looking at me. She was not looking at the police. She was staring at Leo. Her face was a mask of pure primal terror. The kind of terror you feel when the animal you've been tormenting finally turns and you realize you're the one trapped in the cage. Leo did not move. He just stood there, his body still vibrating. Then very slowly, he turned his head. He turned from the black television screen to look at his wife. His face was completely, terrifyingly blank. He had been emotionally hollowed out. The man she had just described, the weak, pathetic child, was gone. All that was left was the shell. He didn't scream. He didn't rage. He just looked at her, and in that moment Sabrina knew. She hadn't just lost the $47 million. She hadn't just lost her freedom. She had lost everything. The black screen of the television reflected the scene in the living room. It was a perfect silent mirror of the wreckage. Leo stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the blank screen, as if he could still see Sabrina's laughing face, still hear her call him weak, pathetic, useful. Sabrina was staring at him, her mouth slightly open, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The terror in her eyes was absolute. She had built her entire world on her ability to control him, and she was watching that control shatter in real time. Annette had her hands clamped over her mouth, her eyes wide with a different kind of horror. She had just been implicated in a federal crime. Arthur Finch, the fake doctor, simply sank back into the wingback chair and closed his eyes. He knew the game was over. The lead police officer stepped forward into the center of the room. The sound of his leather belt creaking was unnaturally loud. He looked at Ben Carter. Ben nodded. The officer turned to Sabrina. Mrs. Sabrina Shaw, he said, his voice hard, official, and devoid of any emotion. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted assault, and reckless endangerment. He reached for her arm. Sabrina didn't fight. She didn't scream. All the manic hysterical energy had drained out of her. She was a puppet whose strings had been cut. She simply held out her hands in front of her, her eyes still locked on Leo's catatonic face. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was like a gunshot in the silent room. No, she whispered. Not in protest, just in disbelief. The second officer turned to the man in the bow tie. Arthur Finch, he said. You are under arrest for conspiracy practicing medicine without a license and aiding in an unlawful commitment. Finch didn't resist. He stood up slowly, like an old man, and put his hands behind his back. He was a professional con man. He knew when to fold. Then the first officer looked at the armchair. Mrs. Annette Conrad. That broke the spell. Annette's head snapped up. Me, she shrieked, her voice cracking. I didn't do anything. I'm a victim here. My husband was poisoned. Ma'am, the officer said patiently, you were present and complicit in a conspiracy to falsely imprison an elderly individual. You are an accessory to all of these crimes. Please stand up. No, she screamed, clawing at the leather chair. I'm not going anywhere. I'll call my lawyer. You can't do this. You don't know who we are. My husband he will end you. Ben Carter let out a small, tired sigh. He looked at the hysterical woman. Mrs. Conrad, he said, his voice flat. Your husband Mitchell was arrested at St. Jude's Hospital 20 minutes ago. He was attempting to flee while still in his hospital gown. He's being held on a federal warrant from the SEC for securities fraud. Trust me, Ben added. Your lawyers are going to be very, very busy. Annette's mouth opened, but all that came out was a high-pitched, strangled noise. The officer pulled her to her feet and cuffed her. They were led out one by one. Sabrina silent and dead-eyed. Finch looking at the floor, Annette finally collapsing into real gasping sobs of despair. And Leo, my son, just stood there. He watched his wife, his mother-in-law, and their family doctor be led out of his father's house in handcuffs. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even blink. He just watched. The front door clicked shut. The sound was deafening in the sudden heavy silence of the living room. Sabrina was gone. Annette was gone. Finch was gone. The only things left were me, my son, Leo, Ben, and Jensen, who was quietly packing his camera gear. Leo was still standing in the exact same spot, a statue carved from ash. He hadn't moved. He was just staring. Staring at the empty space where his wife had been. The lead officer, Officer Riley, was speaking quietly into his radio, confirming the transport. Yes, 3 in custody. 1 male, 2 females. Charges are… He paused. His other phone, his personal cell, began to buzz on his belt. He looked at the caller ID, and his expression sharpened. Excuse me, he said, holding up a finger. He answered it. Riley. Yes, I'm at the Shaw residence now. We just… He went silent, listening intently. His eyes widened slightly. You're kidding me, he said into the phone. In the lobby, while still in his gown. I looked at Ben. Ben looked at me. Wait, say that again. Officer Riley turned, walking a few paces toward the window, as if needing privacy for the shocking news. The SEC. They did what… Leo's head slowly lifted. He was listening now, his catatonic state broken by the new thread of drama. They froze everything, Riley continued. Wow. Okay. Yes. That certainly changes things. So he has no access to counsel, understood. No, we have the wife and the mother-in-law here. We'll add it to the file. Thank you for the heads up. He hung up the phone and let out a long, low whistle. He looked at Ben, then at me. Well, Mr. Shaw, he said, it seems you're not the only one who had a busy night. Mitchell, I asked. though I already knew the answer. Mitchell Conrad, Officer Riley confirmed, shaking his head in disbelief. That was my contact at the hospital. Seems Mr. Conrad got a phone call a few minutes after he woke up, probably from his wife here, warning him that the plan had gone bad. He ripped out his IV, threw on his shoes, and made a run for it. Didn't even bother to change out of his hospital gown. Did he get away? Leo whispered, his voice hoarse. Not even close, the officer said. 2 federal agents from the Securities and Exchange Commission were already in the lobby, waiting to interview him about that little $82 million business of his. They arrested him right by the revolving doors. Apparently, he put up quite a fight for a man who was just poisoned. He put his phone back on his belt. Oh, he added almost as an afterthought. And that SEC warrant, it wasn't just for his arrest. It was a complete asset freeze. As of 30 minutes ago, every account tied to Mitchell Conrad, Annette Conrad, and Conrad Global is frozen. Solid. They can't access a single dime. They can't pay for a cup of coffee, let alone a high-priced defense attorney. He looked at the empty space where Annette had been wailing about her lawyers. Looks like they'll be needing a public defender after all. The final invisible thread had been cut. The Conrad empire, the entire illusion of wealth and power that had seduced my son and fueled this entire nightmare, hadn't just been exposed. It had been, in a single clean stroke, completely and utterly annihilated. The front door clicked shut. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the only sound in the house. The sirens were gone, fading into the city's hum. Ben and Jensen had left. The police were gone. The circus was over. All that was left was the wreckage. Leo was still in the living room. He hadn't moved. He was sitting on the expensive Persian rug that Sabrina had picked out. He was just sitting. His knees were drawn up to his chest, his arms wrapped around them as if he was trying to hold himself together. He looked like a small, lost boy. But his face was the face of an old, broken man. He was staring at the dark television screen. The screen that had shown him the truth. The screen that was now reflecting the empty room and his own empty face. I stood in the hallway watching him for a long time. A minute, maybe 5. The antique clock on the mantelpiece, a gift from my late wife, was ticking. Tick, tock. Each sound was like a hammer blow in the suffocating silence. I looked at him, and the cold, hard anger I had felt for the last 6 months, the righteous fury that had fueled this entire night, it was gone. All that was left was this vast, hollow exhaustion. I had won. I had exposed them. I had saved my fortune. And I had completely, utterly destroyed my son. Was this what victory felt like? It felt like ash in my mouth. Dad. His voice was a dry, cracking whisper. He didn't look at me. He just spoke to the black screen. He swallowed hard, a painful clicking sound. I didn't know. There it was. The last flickering ember of denial. The plea for innocence. The desperate hope that he could still knight a victim in all this. I walked slowly into the room. The plush carpet muffled my steps. I didn't sit. I just stood over him, looking down at the top of his head. You knew Leo, I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was just tired. So profoundly tired. No, he whispered, shaking his head. No, She fooled me, Dad. She lied to me. I loved her. You knew, I repeated, firmer this time. You didn't know about the Ponzi scheme. You didn't know about the poisoning. But deep down, in that place you've been refusing to look at for 3 years, you knew. He looked up at me, then his eyes streaming with tears, his face crumpled in despair. How could I have known? You knew, I said, when your wife, who you knew was drowning in credit card debt, suddenly found the money for a new Maserati. He flinched. You knew, I said, when your brilliant engineering career, the one you loved, was replaced with a fake, high-paying project manager job, where you did nothing all day but take her father to lunch. It was a career change, he stammered. It was a lie. I cut him off. A lie you chose to believe. You knew. I continued, my voice relentless. Every time they mentioned my forgetfulness. Every time they talked about how I needed rest. You knew every time they asked for a loan, and you sat there silent, letting them do it. You knew when you sat at my dinner table eating my food in my house while they subtly, expertly insulted me, and you stayed silent. You chose silence, Leo. He had no answer to that. He just bowed his head, his body shaking with silent, racking sobs. I just wanted her to be happy, he choked out. I just wanted her to love me. I closed my eyes. The honesty of that, the pathetic, heartbreaking truth of it, was worse than any of his lies. And that's the choice you made. I said, my voice softening just a fraction. You chose her happiness over my safety. You chose her lies over my truth. You chose to be comfortable instead of being a man. He had no answer to that. He just wept. I had nothing left to say. The trial, that was for them. This was for him. And it was over. I turned and walked to the small antique table by the door. My car keys were there, right where I'd left them hours ago in a different lifetime. I picked them up. The jingle of the metal tags was explosive in the quiet room. Leo's head snapped up. His sobs cut off. The sound of the keys, it was a sound of movement, of finality. Dad, he whispered, his eyes wide with a new fresh panic. Where are you going? You're leaving me. I'm going to a hotel, I said. Ben has a suite for me at the Omni. I can't be here tonight. But what about me? He whispered. I have nowhere to go. They'll lock the house, Sabrina's family, the bank. This house is yours, I said. The deed is in your name. I gave it to you when you got married, remember? They can't take it. I walked to the door. I opened it. The cool, damp night air felt good on my face. It smelled like rain. I looked back at him one last time. He was still on the floor, a 42-year-old man who looked like a broken child, surrounded by the expensive, tasteless furniture his wife had bought with my stolen money. You can't stay here tonight, Leo, I said. But you just said, it's my house. I mean, you can't stay here, I said, gesturing to the room to his collapsed form. You can't stay in the middle of her life. Her things are in the closet. Her perfume is in the air. Her mother's influence is in these very walls. You can't heal here. You can't even think here. I reached into my pocket. I took out a credit card. A simple new Visa. Not my card. A card Ben had prepared. I tossed it onto the rug in front of him. Go to a hotel, I said. A different one. Go anywhere else. But you have to get out of this room. You have to get out of the wreckage. Dad, I don't know what to do. I know. I said, my hand on the doorknob. And here was the final painful truth. You've spent 3 years being Sabrina's husband. You've spent your whole life being Greg's son. You need to go find a quiet room, somewhere, and for the first time in your life, you need to figure out who Leo is, all by himself. I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped out into the night and pulled the door shut behind me, leaving him alone in the silence. 6 months have passed since that night. The house is quiet now. The gaudy, expensive furniture Sabrina picked out is gone. I sold it all. I gave the money to a victims fund for the people Mitchell Conrad destroyed. My house is my own again. It's filled with my old books, my blueprints, the familiar scent of wood polish and old leather. It's a place of peace. But the silence is different. The trial was a media sensation. The press called it the Tech Titans takedown. They painted me as some kind of calculating mastermind. They weren't entirely wrong, but they missed the point. It was never a game. It was pest control. Mitchell Conrad's case was first. It was a federal trial. It had nothing to do with me, not really. It had to do with the $82 million. The courtroom was packed for weeks. Dozens of families, elderly couples, young professionals. They all took the stand one by one and described how Mitchell had charmed them, befriended them, and then systematically stolen their entire lives, their retirement, their children's college funds, their homes. He sat there in his expensive suit, his arrogance intact, as if he was the victim of a minor misunderstanding. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. 20 years. 20 years in a federal white-collar prison. Not for poisoning me, but for the lifetime of lies that led him to that point. He'll be in his 80s, a broken man by the time he gets out. If he gets out. Then came Sabrina's trial, and Annette's, and Arthur Finch's. They tried to sever their cases, but the judge wouldn't allow it. He called it what it was, a single intertwined conspiracy. Finch, the fake doctor, was smart. He knew the game was up. He turned state's witness against Sabrina and Annette for a lighter sentence. He took the stand and in a calm, clinical voice detailed every meeting, every phone call, every dollar they had promised him to fabricate my dementia. He was sentenced to 3 years for fraud and practicing medicine without a license. A light sentence, but he had given the prosecution what it needed. Annette's defense was pathetic. She just cried. She claimed she was a terrified wife bullied by her husband, ignorant of his business, and that she only went along with the intervention because she was worried about me. But Ben Carter was ready for that. He played the audio from my living room. The tape where she, Sabrina, and Finch were calmly discussing how to handle my paranoia. The tape where Annette herself suggested I might be a danger to others. And then Ben played the hospital security footage. It showed Annette after Mitchell was arrested trying to sneak out a side exit. It showed her screaming at the police not like a grieving victim, but like a queen whose castle was under siege. "You don't know who we are," she had shrieked. The jury hated her. They saw her for what she was, greedy, complicit, and arrogant. She got 5 years as an accessory to conspiracy. And then there was Sabrina. Her trial was the main event. Her lawyers tried everything. They tried to paint her as a victim of her father's overwhelming influence, a dutiful daughter trapped in his web. The prosecutor simply played the video from my study, the one where she laughed about divorcing Leo, the one where she called him weak and pathetic, the one where she planned her escape to the Caymans. So much for the dutiful daughter. Then her lawyers tried to paint her as a victim of my overwhelming influence. They claimed I was a cold, controlling patriarch, that I had driven her to it, that my public humiliation of her at the party was proof of my cruelty. The prosecutor simply played the party footage provided by Jensen, which clearly showed her spiking the drink, and then he played the recording of her hysterical public confession. "That was your glass, you swapped it." Finally, they tried the insanity defense. They argued that the stress of her father's crimes and her husband's indifference had caused a temporary psychotic break. Dr. Alani, the toxicologist from the hospital, was called to the stand. She was a brilliant, no-nonsense witness. She explained in excruciating clinical detail that the custom-compounded olanzapine was not the act of a panicked person. It was the act of a patient, methodical, and highly motivated predator. The jury deliberated for 45 minutes. I was in the courtroom when they read the verdict. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, guilty. On the count of attempted assault in the first degree, guilty. On the count of conspiracy to falsely imprison, guilty. On the count of forgery related to the work of Arthur Finch, guilty. With every guilty, she flinched as if she was being struck. The judge was not kind. He called her actions a betrayal of a nature so profound it shocks the conscience of the court. He sentenced her to 15 years in a state penitentiary. 15 years, 20 years, 5 years. They are just numbers. They don't capture the real justice. The real justice was watching their faces as the verdicts were read. The realization that their web of lies, their arrogance, their belief that they were smarter, better, that they were entitled to my life's work, it all came crashing down on them. The $47 million was never the prize. It was just the bait. The real prize was this. The silence in that courtroom. The sound of handcuffs clicking. The truth. And what about Leo, my son? He was a different kind of casualty. He wasn't a victim, but he wasn't a criminal, not in the same way. The law had no charges for him. There is no jail time for being weak, for being blind, for choosing willful ignorance over the truth. His punishment was internal. After that night, after watching his entire world get led away in handcuffs, he completely collapsed. He spent 3 weeks in a private treatment facility. Ben handled the admission. The diagnosis was complex. Severe depression, anxiety, and a complete psychological breakdown. When he got out, he didn't come back to the house. He couldn't. This house was a mausoleum, a monument to his wife's betrayal and his own failure. He just left. He took that one credit card I had tossed him, the one with a small limit, and he got on a bus. He went north, to Oregon. He left the expensive suits, the designer watches, the Italian shoes. He left the ghost of Leo project manager behind. He didn't call me for months. I respected that. He had nothing to say, and I had nothing to ask. He had to figure out who he was all by himself, just as I had told him. Then last week, a letter arrived. It wasn't an email. It was a real letter written on simple lined paper, in a hand I barely recognized. His engineering penmanship had always been sharp, precise. This was hesitant. Messy. I opened it, my hands for the first time in a long time, unsteady. It wasn't a plea for help. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an excuse. It was just a letter. He told me he was living in a small town outside of Portland. He was renting a room above a garage. He told me he had found a job. He was working as an apprentice at a local carpentry shop. A carpentry shop. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. My son, the man who had abandoned his love for building bridges, was now finally building something real again. The letter was short. It didn't ask for money. It didn't ask for forgiveness. He told me about a chair. "It's a simple chair, Dad," he wrote. "An Adirondack. My boss said the joinery was acceptable. It's the first thing I've built with my own hands in 3 years. The only thing I've built. It's not perfect. It's crooked. But it's solid. And it's real." He had included a photograph, a blurry picture of a simple wooden chair sitting on a dusty workshop floor. It was the ugliest, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I folded the letter. He hadn't asked for a response. He was just reporting in, showing his work. He was finally building something again. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to build himself. I didn't retire. That was the biggest irony of all. I sold Shaw Tech to save it from predators, thinking I would finally go read all those books I'd bought. But sitting in that quiet, empty house, the silence was too loud. That $47 million felt heavy. It felt like the price of my son's soul. I couldn't just put it in a mutual fund and watch it grow. It had to do something. Ben Carter and I had a long lunch. I looked at him, the only man I trusted in the world. "What do we do now, Ben?" He just smiled. "I think you know, Greg. 2 months after the trials ended, we incorporated the Shaw Carter Foundation Justice for Seniors. It's a nonprofit. a legal defense fund. We are a private, heavily funded, and extremely aggressive organization that provides pro bono legal help to the elderly who are being financially abused by their own families. Ben runs the legal side. I run the operations. My skills, it turns out, are perfectly transferable. We are the people you call when your children try to have you declared incompetent. We are the ones who pay for the real doctors, the real private investigators. We hunt down the greedy sons, the manipulative daughters, the Arthur Finches of the world. We give the victims the one thing I had that they don't, the resources to fight back. We give them a voice, and we give them teeth. I'm in a boardroom right now. It's not in a tower, just a simple office downtown. But I feel more powerful here than I ever did at Shaw Tech. Across from me are 3 young, hungry lawyers, the first recipients of the Shaw Carter Fellowship. They're reviewing this case of an 80-year-old woman in Ohio whose children are trying to sell her family farm out from under her, claiming she's forgetful. They look at me, waiting for guidance for the final word. I received another letter from Leo last week. He's a foreman at the carpentry shop now. He's good at it. He's rebuilding. Maybe we both are. I fold his letter and put it in my jacket pocket next to my heart. I look at the young lawyers at the case files spread across the table at the picture of the 80-year-old woman in Ohio. My old company, Shaw Tech. It was about connecting machines. We built the networks that let computers talk to each other. It was good, clean work. I look at the new case file. I look at Ben, who smiles. But this new company, I say, my voice clear and strong. This one is about reconnecting lives. I tap the file. All right, let's get to work. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about greed and perception. It shows how desperation, like the $82 million fraud hanging over Mitchell and Sabrina, can poison the soul, turning family into a financial opportunity and loved ones into obstacles. They were so blinded by their own arrogance and their need for that $47 million that they saw Gregory as a weak old man, not as the brilliant strategist who had spent a lifetime building an empire. The true moral is that money doesn't define your worth or your power. True strength lies in integrity, wisdom, and the courage to protect your dignity, proving that those who are underestimated are often the most dangerous. Let us know in the comments, do you think Gregory's elaborate trap was an act of perfect justice, or did he go too far?